Hello, everyone. I'm Eva, and I'm very excited to welcome you to our second Active Peers AI YouTube live stream today. We have developed and launched this series because we want to give you insight into how you can use Active Peers AI to host engaging and active peer learning sessions for your group so that your participants can get the chance to effectively share knowledge, build confidence, and discover their untapped potential. For those of you who aren't familiar with Active Peers AI, let me give you a quick explanation of what this company is all about. At Active Peers AI, we use artificial intelligence to enable our clients to facilitate a group of people who are engaging in an active and collaborative learning experience. We have built a unique matching algorithm that matches people together based on what they already know and what they want to learn. This ensures that everybody finds the best peer learning partner possible to make the most out of their collaborative learning. We also have a peer learning prompter that is used to guide peer discussions to ensure that everybody gets a chance to share, but also learn from one another in the most effective way possible. Today, I'm going to be interviewing our CEO and founder, Susan HayesCulleton, and a special guest regarding their experience of early career development and networking in a hybrid environment. In August, Susan helped the company facilitate a 2-week internship for a group of university students. During the internship, Susan used Active Peers AI many times. For instance, Susan used Active Peers AI survey tool to help the group identify their strengths and also their areas of improvement. And then she matched people accordingly to spread knowledge around effectively. Susan also used the custom prompter to help the interns prepare for a podcast interview. You're going to hear all about how she made the magic happen. So before we invite Susan and our guest to join us, we have put together a short video that gives you insight into how Susan enabled early career development and networking during the internship. We will now play the video for you, and then we will invite Susan and our guest to join us soon after. I hope you all enjoyed watching the video as much as we have enjoyed putting it together for you. I will now hand it over to Susan and our special guest, Anya, who was one of the students who did the 2-week internship with us.
Well, hello there, Anya. It's super to have you with us today. How are you doing since, of course, we met a couple of weeks ago now during the internship?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Just kind of getting back into university, so quite overwhelming with work, but yeah, doing well. How are you?
Doing super indeed, and really excited to talk to you today, Anya, because As you heard Eva say there, we want to have a chat all around how we used a lot of different technologies during the internship. So let's take it from the top. First of all, as you know, one of the key things I really wanted to do was to enable digital networking to happen. And just as we showed you there in the video, we used to use LinkedIn quite a lot. Like every morning, I used to put a question out there and crowdsource the wisdom. So what was your experience of being on the recipient of that, where you had to come up with the wisdom every morning?
Yes, so every morning Susan would upload a question on LinkedIn for the group to answer, which would typically involve us reflecting on our own life goals and experiences. So like these questions included, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and what are you doing today that's going to help you in 10 years' time? They're clearly questions which we don't usually reflect upon on a daily basis, but I actually thought this was a really refreshing exercise to do, to start off our day on the right foot and to kind of get that sort of burst of wisdom to bring our focus back onto what's important. I remember for the question on the best piece of advice I was given, I always go back to a piece of advice my dad would give my brother and I about hard work. He would always say that if choosing between two paths, never choose the easy one and always choose the harder one, as success does not come to those who take the easy option, and the rewards will come in the future. So I really think that circling back to these pieces of advice on a regular basis is a great habit to do. And not only reflecting on my own questions was helpful during the internship, but reading other people's answers was particularly interesting because, despite our best efforts, we are all restricted by our own narrow personal experiences, and getting to read other people's insights really kind of broadens our horizons, and allowed me to think in a fresh, more kind of fuller perspective. For example, one of my colleagues said that the best piece of advice he was given was to have a path, but to be flexible as different opportunities present themselves for a reason. Again, this is something that I'd never really considered, which truly highlights the benefits of these crowdsourced wisdom questions.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I think there's, as you say, there's two things in that. There's one is actually you learning from yourself, which is like what you already know and just being able to reflect that back. But secondly, definitely, as you say, Anya, is to be able to hear from other people, which ties in really well into my next question, which is teamwork. At the end of the day, an internship is about learning from other people, both your peers as well as people who've been there for a while. And we use the algorithm and we used random matching. We used a range of different things so that then you'd be working in pairs and working in groups, but also where you got to work with a lot of different learning styles and working styles, and of course work with different groups and different projects. So what was your experience of the team, the pair, the group matching along the way?
Yeah, so teamwork is an absolutely essential aspect of working in a corporation. I think it would be very difficult to find a job in most sectors around the world where employees just kind of work alone without any form of collaboration. So working in groups on a wide range of projects during the internship was really reflective of the things that we will be doing in our future careers. I think being paired with different people allowed for great synergies among members, like the bouncing of ideas and the sharing of knowledge. To be completely honest, coming into the internship, I assumed that all my fellow interns would come from business and sort of finance related courses. However, I was really surprised at the wide range of disciplines we covered. And what I found was that each person from each discipline had a totally diverse way of approaching our tasks. So studying business and economics in university, I had kind of a strategic approach to handling our projects. However, interns coming from backgrounds in STEM brought a sort of like systematic analytical perspective onto projects, which was obviously extremely advantageous to our groups.
That was one of the things that struck me as well, is the diversity within the group. And you're totally right. Lots of people expect, everyone else has it sorted. Or as you say, everybody comes from a background where they need to be, etc. So from that point of view, I know exactly where you're coming from. And then, Anya, if we just move on then from there, when it comes to that self-reflection, the reflection every morning, the surveys that I asked you to do, the feedback every day, but also then thinking of all of the interactions you had with other people in the company, that sometimes I wonder, is it exhausting? For me, it's really helpful because it banks in the learning, and that was the intent. And on the other hand, it can be, the reason I say exhausting is that it's hard to keep thinking back over what you've done, etc. So what was your experience of that?
So yeah, being an intern in the program, I really appreciated the Active Peers AI feedback mechanisms, as it really showed me that they were kind of focused on creating the best program for us, tailored to what we found worked best for us throughout the week, which made us feel like the company really cared about our experience. I remember on the first day of the internship, the last half hour or so was dedicated to reading the firm's quarterly magazine. And the next morning when Susan posted a survey reflecting on the task, after reading the reviews on it, and what we felt like could be improved on, the next time we had a reading exercise to do, Susan made sure it was made into a group discussion, which we all thoroughly enjoyed. So yeah, the feedback mechanisms were great.
And did you find that you learned more as a result of documenting what you learned?
Yeah, I think it mainly just helped me, reflect on how much we actually did cover during the internship. Sometimes things can kind of go over your head. So I did feel like I learned more. And now it sounds like I'm putting words in your mouth, but I certainly feel as well, when you're in really busy days, and of which the internship was, and I know I was the architect of it, so I made sure of it. But when you're having very busy days, you can be very focused on the next thing and completing that before you move on to that. So actually taking the time to think through, what did I learn from that? I find really banks it in. Instagram, Anya, is a tool that I find we often think is simply just a way of posting pictures, or a way in which to keep up with influencers. And I often think it's underestimated as a learning tool. Personally, I think there's a lot to be said for the question stickers, for the quick polls, for the way in which they interact, etc. What's your take on Instagram now that you've seen it being used in the workplace? Yeah, so I guess once you get beyond the constant drone of like funny animal videos on your Instagram feed, which I must admit I do love, Instagram is actually a really great way of interacting with your audience. The main reason I feel this way is because it's less kind of permanent and like widely shared as LinkedIn. When you respond to a question on LinkedIn, all of your connections can see what you've said as it comes up on their feed, which can sometimes deter people from actually placing that comment for fear of maybe losing professionalism by spamming your followers or not saying the exact right thing, which in a sense loses the sort of authenticity of the platform. However, with Instagram, when responding to questions or commenting on posts, it doesn't come up on your friends' feeds, which encourages people to kind of give their honest opinions on questions, which obviously has huge benefits to companies themselves. The company can share your response, but your name isn't shown, which is great. And I actually have first-hand experience in this. During my time at Jessica Graf, it was a small Irish clothing company. I was the head of the face mask division, and I'd be in charge of a lot of the marketing aspects about our face masks. So I would always put up polls and question boxes on Instagram to sort of interact with our clients and see what their honest opinions and honest thoughts were on our products and what they felt could be improved, which I found that they really appreciated.
I find the difference that you've now posed between LinkedIn and Instagram is interesting. The idea that all of your connections can see a comment, and therefore it might affect their view on your professionalism, despite the fact that your professionalism, of course, could be very, very high. That's interesting. There's a sense of permanence, or everybody seeing. Whereas, of course, if somebody answers a question sticker, then nobody sees it except the recipient. Now, I, first of all, totally agree with you also about the market research point, is that as a tool to interact between a brand and its community, Instagram can be brilliant. Again, I think it's sometimes underestimated. And of course, the other thing as well is that you can take questions in from an audience and then answer through video or answer through other things as well. That sounds like a pretty interesting experience that you had in that previous internship as well. Could you just tell us a little bit more about how you interacted with the community there to understand what they wanted?
Yeah, so I essentially would just kind of put up polls on Instagram or question boxes saying, which face mask do you prefer? What's the best thing that you like about our face mask? What do you think could be improved on? Is there any new designs that you would like to see? So it was pretty much stuff like that. Or, is there any local areas around you that you think that would benefit from our face masks? Is there anywhere that you can't find stock of them? So just questions like that. And it kind of gave followers more, it kind of encouraged them more to reach out to us because to kind of answer their questions, because once a question box is right there, you feel more inclined to just click it instead of actually going in and looking for the person's page and messaging them like that. So it was great.
That's interesting that is the way in which that happened. But I think it's also really important to reach out, is to think through how can I use this tool to reach out, and then of course engage again afterwards. Speaking of asking questions, one of the tasks each of you had within the internship was to interview somebody for a podcast. And we have a custom prompter that we help people with at Active Peers, and we also present a range of questions that we feel can be very helpful in helping people understand and learn from each other. But through that task, Anya, what was your experience at the time of coming up with questions with a view to getting answers, but also understanding the power or influence of good questions?
Yeah, so of course, interviewing a senior member of staff was quite an intimidating task. So having the prompter questions available, which kind of gave me an idea of the type of questions asked, kind of took some pressure out of the situation. From my own experience, I thought the prompter questions were really helpful in structuring my answers for the podcast interview. They were kind of structured in a way that they included many sub-questions, which kind of gave the interviewee greater leeway in, to sort of lead wherever they wanted to and where they were kind of most passionate about, which I think made for a great interview.
The space then that you create for people to lead, was that important? Was that important then, that you didn't go in with a very fixed agenda with closed questions, but instead, did you think about that in advance, or was it something you were learning kind of as you were going?
I think that's really what I learned from the prompter questions, because originally I'd kind of gone in with the idea of just having the questions that I was going to ask. And then I thought if I was in that situation, I would kind of want greater leeway and to kind of dive into parts that I found more interesting about the questions or not, because I guess some people might not be kind of passionate about the questions that I might ask, and it might only have a couple of things to say. So when you give them kind of greater options, I thought it was really helpful.
Okay. I think that it's always interesting just to hear exactly what people are getting out of an experience, and I didn't know that actually. That's good to know. Within a lot of what we're talking about today, ultimately what's coming to mind is a very tight feedback loop. Is whether it is looking at the prompter, coming up with your own questions, whether it was the surveys, and even the example you said about the reading on the first day and then turning it into a group discussion after that, or else the crowdsourced wisdom, etc. Now that you've had experience of getting a lot of feedback, and maybe you had it before, maybe you've been in environments where you've got a lot of feedback before and were responsible for giving a lot too, what do you think now is a good feedback loop?
Yeah, so I think being open to feedback is an absolutely essential aspect of work nowadays. Like with increasing competitions in all industries, like in order to retain clients, firms really do need to prioritize kind of good customer service and having good feedback loops. It really is essential to this. I think this kind of good feedback loop involves firms being open to actively listening to what their clients have to say about their services and what they can improve on, while, and then this is the key part, actually taking the time to rethink these issues and implement the appropriate changes. So, when customers feel like their opinion is important to a firm, they feel in a way connected to the firm and they know that they're valued, which is kind of the building block of good client relationships.
But everything you're saying is brilliant, but the hard part of receiving feedback is receiving feedback. And that's, when you say at the beginning, it's very important to be open to it. Why do you think people are closed to it? And second part to that question, what do you do when you receive feedback that is less than comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's kind of natural for us not to kind of want to hear bad feedback. But I think, me personally, I love to hear what I can improve on. I'm constantly looking at, things that I can improve on. I do really like constructive criticism. However, I know some people can maybe be more sensitive to it. So I'm not sure. I think I just think it really is key, and I don't think people want to hear it because I guess it can bring up maybe some insecurities, or it's a difficult one.
It can be a difficult one. You're right there. It certainly can be a difficult one for sure. But you're right. I think hunger for feedback is really important, and you definitely have it, Anya, definitely in a really, really good way. And I think that it's and just maybe to reinforce the point that I made during the internship with you, is that constructive criticism certainly is very good and very important, but actually feedback about what you do well is also very important from the point of view of, if you're good at something, double click on it. It was the phrase that I often use. Take the positive stuff too. I think we can often be looking for, okay, what do I need to change? But when you ask what works, it isn't just to kind of get a pat in the back or kind of the good news before the bad news. It is that there's a lot of insight in there too. My last question to you today is, there's a lot of places in the workplace where you can get feedback, where you can learn. There's a lot of ways to be proactive about your learning, whether it is listening to a podcast every day or signing up for a course or putting your hand up for things. But there's also learning in surprising parts of our lives too, Anya. And so from your point of view, what or who surprisingly has taught you a lesson along the way?
That's a really interesting question. So I think throughout the internship, I can wholeheartedly say I have learned a lot. But the most important lesson that I learned throughout my time was actually presented to me through the guest speakers who came to talk to us. So just a quick note about me: I'm a very driven person. So when I have a goal, I pretty much have tunnel vision until it's achieved. I know that I want to pursue a career in investment banking, and I'm working towards any opportunity that will help me further my career towards it. However, throughout the internship, the guest speakers really highlighted the importance of not being so rigid and instead being open to kind of more opportunities that come my way, as you never know where it can lead you to. And this is something that I'd never considered, but after listening to pretty much all the guest speakers talk about their indirect career paths to finance, it really opened my eyes to a new way of thinking that, maybe sometimes tunnel vision can be a bad thing. Had these speakers been closed off to new opportunities, even in careers away from finance, they wouldn't be where they are today. And this is something that I really have thought about a lot since the internship, and it really taught me a very valuable lesson, I think.
That's interesting. So the idea of driven, focused goals is very natural to you, but actually turning that in its head and being open to spontaneity, serendipity, opportunity, that was the surprise. Interesting indeed. Well, Anya, thank you so much indeed for being with us today. You've shared a lot of insights and wisdom with us for sure. But also there's an awful lot that I think people can take away from what you've said, and really and truly wish you the very best in all that you do. And thank you again for being here and for your lovely quote that we have at the end of the video that we just played there a while ago, where you said you learned more in 2 weeks than you ever thought possible. So that was really, really lovely to hear, and thank you so much. And we will see you again on another occasion.
See you. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thanks, Anya. Thank you indeed. So now what we're going to do is we are going to now bring back Eva. Eva, I actually found that really interesting there. I think Anya's point of view in some ways is kind of, it surprised me that it surprised her, that sense of being open to opportunity is something that can lead to a lot of insight or to a lot of new opportunity that you don't see if you are of tunnel vision. And also I think as well, she's hit the nail on the head there of what I had really hoped to achieve in leading that internship, around looking at what people can learn from each other. It's so critical. It's really, really critical that we not just try to learn as much as we can from maybe the authority in the room or the speakers or the people who seem to, maybe the people who have gone a step ahead, but also learning from perspectives from other peers. What did you take out of that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely really agree with her idea of the tunnel vision. I think it's very important for you to be open to other open to other opportunities, because you never know what's going to come your way if you're not open to it. But I think you both had a really insightful discussion, Susan. Like, you both really delved into the different aspects of the internship. I really liked how you crowdsourced wisdom and how she was able to learn. She was not only able to reflect on herself, but she was also able to learn from her peers. I also liked how you both talked so much about reflecting, giving feedback, and how Instagram can actually be a really good tool to network and so much more. So now we are finally going to move to the exciting part, which is the Q&A session. So before we begin, I just want to thank our audience for all the questions that they have submitted in advance. We love to hear from our audience, and we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can today. And if you haven't submitted questions already for the Q&A session, you still have a chance to do so by typing them in the live chat. So Susan, the first question that someone asked is, what soft or hard skills should I acquire in my early career days?
Okay, I would say that I'm going to pick one of each, Eva. The first one, I'm going to go on a soft skill, and it's one that's lesser discussed, because the ones that are often discussed are teamwork and collaboration and creativity. And I think many people know about those. The one I would say is curiosity, is that it's really important to be interested in what a company is doing, in the trends of a sector, in seeing where the future might go, in being interested in other people's stories, in asking questions like, what has happened in the past if you made a mistake, or where do you see the future of technology going, etc. And I think curiosity is something that can lead to really strong relationships. I think it can lead to a much more authentic sense of networking. And I think it's much more interesting to be curious than not. So I think that's one. And you can teach yourself to be curious by understanding that everybody's a story, that, you know, talking to somebody in a coffee shop and asking them how they got their job there, as well as listening to a TEDx talk and wondering how they got to be there, as well as talking to people who maybe are in a more junior position than you. So that's the soft skill, I would say. Now, the hard skill. For me, now maybe it is I'm biased and maybe it is I'm speaking at the moment because we are here live. Maybe I'm of its time. But for me, low code or no code development in technology is so important. And I think that because it marries a couple of things together. Low code technology is when you're using different types of technologies where you don't need code at all. You just need to know what you want to achieve out of them. And then you can use building blocks and simple tools in order to get towards that outcome. The reason I think this, Eva, is number one, you can learn really quickly. Number two, you can try out things really quickly. And number three, there are so many companies today talking about digital transformation, but I suppose, okay, where I'm really coming from in this is I emceed a conference a couple of years ago on digital transformation. And one of the central points that came out of that is companies often look at technology and say, how can we use this? As opposed to looking at a business problem and say, what technology can we use to support this? And if you can come into a company and understand the building blocks of how low code technologies work, let's say Airtable, ClickUp, and there's loads more, and understand a business problem and build something quickly to test to see if that can solve something, then I think you're really on a winner.
That's really interesting, Susan. When I think about soft skills, I normally hear like teamwork, communication, good time management skills. So it's very interesting that you said curiosity, but I do agree with you that I feel like if a person isn't curious enough to learn about different things, then he or she will always be sort of like stuck in their comfort bubble and like not really pursue things that they might actually be interested in. And then now moving on to our second question, someone asked, what should I be doing to improve my career prospects?
Well, picking up on your comfort bubble, which I like the idea of that. First of all, Eva, we need to think about how to expand that, right? So how do you go beyond your comfort bubble or your comfort zone? Okay, again, I'm going to pick two things here. The first thing that I'm going to say is ask questions, but I'm going to be even more specific than that, and it ties in with curiosity, is ask people, how is it that you can succeed? And if I'm going to be more specific again, I need to take a step backwards and think, well, what does career success really mean to you? Because to different people, it could mean prestige, more responsibility, less responsibility, more budget, more time off, a title, a promotion. Success means different things to different people. And we often think of a ladder as vertical, but if you think about it, a ladder couldn't actually stand if it was vertical. Actually, generally speaking, a ladder can be diagonal. And so you can move up and move across, and sometimes at the same time. So what I would do is think about, okay, what is it that I would want? Let's say that I want seniority. Now, what does seniority mean? Maybe it means more responsibility, maybe it means more visibility, and maybe it means more flexibility. And I'm literally thinking of these as I'm talking to you, Eva. Then I would talk to people who have more flexibility, more visibility, and more responsibility and ask them how they got there. So I think in terms of improving career prospects, determining what you want and then talking to people who've done it can be a good way of doing things. And then the second thing that I would say is that it's also important to build upon your own skills and to consistently learn. And I'm saying those two words because they're both important, consistent and learn. So I think that there's something really powerful in consistency, whether we look at investing, whether we look at business development, whether you look at a child who learns how to walk. They all three things share the commonality of doing something small every day that can build so that you have the power of compounding. So I think consistency is really important. So if you can apply the theory of consistency to learning. So how can you learn? Just like I said to Anya, of course, you can go on like a course, a master's, a PhD, but they're big things. But if you consistently listen to a podcast every day, listen to a TEDx talk every day, then that is another way in which you can consistently learn. And let me go just even smaller again. If you simply write down something you've learned every day, that will bank the learning in from you. Like I spoke to Anya about, is that if you, it's something I do, the end of every day, I write down something I've achieved in the day. And I think from that point of view, I can see the capability of that consistency and learning incrementally improve all the time. So I would say two things. One is looking forward and one is looking back. Looking forward, saying, well, what do I really want? And talking to the people who've done it already and learning from them. But then also applying the power of compounding of consistency in learning, and then over time in the past that will aggregate into your future. That's what I would say.
Those are great tips, Susan. So first of all, people should connect with other people that they aspire, that has something that you aspire to be in the future. For example, whether it's flexibility, seniority, or visibility. And I think LinkedIn would be a great way to connect with these people, or even to go to like a networking event. And then also learning every day is important. And I like how that we don't necessarily need to like achieve big milestones like getting a master's or PhD. And there are still ways for us to learn every day and to continue to improve ourselves. So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now someone asks, what advice would you have liked to have heard when you were just starting out?
Right. I'm going to surprise people maybe with the first one, and that is that enjoyment is a superpower. A lot of people think, no, you asked me the question, what did I wish? So I'm going to say what I thought. I thought starting out that hard work meant it was going to be unenjoyable, sacrifice, grit, grin and bear it type of thing. And I was wrong, Eva. Yes, there is sacrifice, and yes, there is all of those things, but real sustainability, real growth comes from enjoyment. And I would put a bet on with you, and I'm not a betting woman. I'm an investing woman, but I'm not a betting woman, is that put me up against anybody where we've the same talent level, we have the same competence, but I enjoy doing the task much more than them. I will stay going longer, I will be more creative, I will outrun them, and I will probably outperform them. So enjoyment is a superpower. And the older I get, which is, happening at the same pace as everybody else, the older I get, the more I realise, the more I enjoy what I do, the better I can be at it. And I think being a child of the time that I was, and I was always an aspiring entrepreneur, during my teens, and stories back then of successful entrepreneurs were full of grit and, and just keep going and be the one who can stay the longest and who can last the longest. I don't agree with that. I really don't. And I don't want to be one of these people that espouses that. I would genuinely say if you can truly find what you're passionate about, but what you enjoy the most, and then I think there's another circle in that Venn diagram, something that is of use to other people. And the Venn diagram that I have in my head is from the hedgehog concept from the book Good to Great. That if you can truly enjoy what you do, I think it's a superpower for sure. And the second thing that I would say, this also is a bit, I think, I'm surprised to hear me say it at my age relative to what I would have wanted to hear earlier, is that while you might feel that there's very little time, there's a lot of time. And a phrase comes to mind here again, and that is that people often overestimate what they can achieve in a short period of time, but underestimate what they can achieve in a long period of time. And sometimes, Eva, I think I would have berated myself to think, God, why wasn't I able to do that in 6 months? Or why wasn't I able to do that in a year? Or even, why didn't I get all of the lists that I wanted to achieve today? And sometimes, on the other hand, I can look back on a day in my diary, because I remember I told you that I write down something I achieve every day. Sometimes I can look at my diary 5 years ago and look what I was achieving then relative to now and go, what happened there? How was I able to take that leap? So I think what I would have also really liked to hear at the time, and do you know what, I probably did hear it at the time, but I didn't believe it, is that there's a lot of time. And the investment of consistency and the day-to-day, and I suppose another phrase that comes to mind is what you do every day matters far more than what you do once in a while, is look at what you do every day and then build on that. So I think I might have, if I could slightly change your question, I probably heard the second one years ago. I think the question I would ask is, what did I wish I believed when I started out? And that would be it. But definitely, enjoyment is a superpower. And the more I know of it, the more I'm enjoying it. It's great.
That's really intriguing, Susan. It's amazing to hear that you're enjoying your work. I think everybody should be able to enjoy what you do, but sadly, that's just not possible for everyone. And then now on to the last question. This is actually about networking. They said, if I were to go to a networking event for the first time, what kind of questions could I ask to break the ice?
It's interesting that one came up, because that's a question I would have probably asked in an earlier stage as well. And I've been to countless networking events, and it's different actually, Eva, when you're at the top of the room and when you're in the event, because when you're at the top of the room, you find yourself in a different situation where lots of people know about you and you don't know sometimes anything about them. So you are the one asking the questions. So what I would say there is, first of all, it's always good to ask people what they do. It's not always easy to understand what they say. So what I would do with a follow-on question there is ask, could you give me an example of a case study or a client that you've worked with recently, so I can have a better understanding of what you do? That can often lead to a richer conversation. And that's because when people go to networking, obviously they want to develop connections and develop relationships. Let's take all of that as a given. But also what they often want is to be able to understand what other people do, and also to meet lots of new people and maybe catch up. There's a lot going on in their minds. So what I'm trying to say here is to help you understand better what they're doing. That can be a good clarifying question. The second thing I would say is asking people, is there a way that I can help you with your goals? Now, I've often asked that, Eva, and a lot of people are surprised. They say, oh, that's very nice of you to ask. But at the end of the day, that's what building relationships is all about. It's about, yes, reciprocity going both ways, but it has to start somewhere. So I think by asking that question, it's a good way to just understand if there is, like, maybe it is they're looking for staff, maybe they're looking for a supplier, maybe they're looking to know of other networking events that they should go to. But I will say, if you ask that question, be ready for the opposite to come back to you. So when you're going to events, also, be ready to ask for something if people make an offer. And the last thing I'll say, in the spirit of what Anya and I were talking about earlier about LinkedIn, is I would also say connect with everybody that you meet, whether it's on Twitter, LinkedIn if it's business networking, Instagram. Just make connections, because that's the way truly that networks are built. And something that I'm a big fan of doing is that I do a LinkedIn Live on a regular basis on my own LinkedIn profile. And I always think that the more posting I do, or the more activity that I put into my networking, then it can lead to, and I'm quoting another quote here, increasing the surface area of look. The more people that know about what you're doing, then it's a function of two things. Number one, telling them, and number two, having that network in the first place. So they're the three things that I would say is I would ask them to give you a case study or a client that they've been working on recently. Is also ask them, can you connect on LinkedIn, and also ask them, what can you do to help them achieve their goals? And after that, I think you'll be well into the conversation.
Those are really great tips, Susan. I'm sure our audience really appreciates that. Now, unfortunately, that is all the time for the Q&A session that we have today. So we're going to end it right here. It was really nice to have you with us, Susan. I'm sure our audience has found the Q&A session and your discussion with Anya as helpful as I have. And thank you so much to our audience for taking the time out to join us in our second YouTube Live and for all of your amazing questions. Active Peers AI is looking forward to seeing you all again in our future live streams. Take care and goodbye, everyone.